Good afternoon. So I mentioned to James, who just introduced me so elegantly, that if you have questions or comments, don't wait until I finish sharing my thoughts with you. Ask them or make them whenever you so feel. It's hard for me to actually see very well with the lights, but so feel free to shout. It won't be the first time I've heard shouts when I share my thoughts with folks.
Because we're recording, we would ask that you use the mics that are located in each one of the aisles. When I see you, I will point to you and let you know that it's time to ask the question.
So let me share with you in the broadest sense what Homeland Security means. It means really fundamentally the security of our institutions, the security of our way of life, and I think very importantly, the security of our values. And the internet and the ethics of communication and engagement via that network is very much a part of what we do. And it is clear that the challenges to network security are immense and, quite frankly, are escalating each and every day. And we as a government are making advancements in our work in this area, but I think everyone understands, and we most certainly do, that we are not where we need to be. And so that is why I have come here, quite frankly, to Black Hat, and to share some thoughts with you about our vision, and to really hopefully elicit your thoughts and input. Because it is, quite frankly, breathtaking, the talent and expertise that exists in this room and throughout this conference, and we need and ask for your assistance in the work that we are doing. You know, the Secretary and I every morning get an intelligence and information briefing about the threats and the events that are occurring or have recently occurred not only domestically, but throughout the world. And increasingly, the cybersecurity or network security threats and events are becoming more and more prominent in those briefings on a daily basis. And it speaks to the challenges that we face. And it is clear as I travel around the country and speak with companies and experts in this arena, that the state of affairs is rather turbulent. And that reality, I think, is echoed when I engage internationally as well, whether it's with companies that are domiciled in other nations or speaking with my government counterparts around the world. Network security and the challenges to that security are of increasing prioritization and, quite frankly, of increasing concern. And so it's clear that the current state of affairs, an individualized or solo response to those challenges and those threats, is not working as ably as we would want to ensure that the internet is a duly protected arena of free expression and free communication. And we in the Department of Homeland Security consider ourselves uniquely situated within the federal government construct to address that challenge and to address those threats as a facilitator and enabler of the private sector. And I want to, if I can, explain for a moment why that is so. The Department of Homeland Security is a civilian agency, and we stand at the intersection of four critical stakeholders: the private sector, the enforcement community, the intelligence community, and then our own departmental responsibilities in protecting the .gov space. And it is in recognition of our unique place at the intersection of the work of those four key stakeholders that we created our critical response protocols and our critical response organization in the NCIC, an organization that I think, or that I hope all of you are familiar with, the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center. And critically, it is not a body that seeks to determine and find accountability, but rather to facilitate the response and remediation of incidents and the protection of networks for the future. The NCIC is staffed with remarkable talent that is dedicated to the sharing of information that we obtain through our channels, the ability to utilize that information and disseminate it. We do that every day. The private sector and government partners are represented on the floor of the NCIC, and to assist in the response and remediation. And we have actually teams that travel to the locations where incidents have occurred to assist in the response protocols. We have, as I mentioned, as a result of our unique position, the ability to take, for example, classified information and, with our government partners, declassify it and disseminate it more broadly. We share now information through bulletins, through alerts, through person-to-person or entity-to-entity channels. We do it in a form that is not automated, and I'll speak in a moment about that. We also, in recognition, I think the President, in recognition of our unique place in the federal government, in his last executive order, placed us in a position of responsibility to lead the effort in the formation of information sharing and analysis organizations, the organizations that will hopefully flourish in the private sector so that the private sector can communicate critical information amongst themselves so that you can share information and hopefully share it with us for wider dissemination. And this month, we are designating the institution, after a request for proposal, a solicitation for interest, we're designating the institution that will establish the best practices for ISAOs, or information sharing and analysis organizations. What is our vision for the future? It is an automated and a near real-time capacity to share information that we receive so that we can disseminate it broadly and strengthen the ecosystem, at least raise the bar and level set the capacity of the private sector to protect itself and for our government partners to protect themselves. When a cyber threat indicator is shared with us, when a particular organization suffers an attack, we can receive that information in automated form and in near real time disseminate it more broadly so that the replication of that threat does not occur. And I think it's very important to identify another critical element of our uniqueness in the Department of Homeland Security, and that is that we are the only department that has a statutorily created Office of Privacy and Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. And so we are very mindful, and quite frankly, in the development of legislation, we have articulated the importance of this. We are very mindful of privacy interests as well as civil liberty interests, and those important equities are brought to bear in the development of our framework and in the execution of our responsibilities. And so when we receive a cyber threat indicator, we would ensure that the privacy interests and the civil liberty interests are protected as we receive that and as we push out the information that would equip others. Phyllis Schneck, who's here, my colleague from the Department of Homeland Security, this is her vision, and what she is, I think, named it as is a weather map. So when one institution suffers a threat, the question is, can we avoid the replication of that threat by another institution, and therefore really level set the playing field to better protect the ecosystem as a whole. There is one important element that we recognize that is a challenge in achieving, I think, the full potential of our vision, and that is the issue of trust. And that issue of trust, I think, emanates from a number of different sources, whether it is the government's collection and analysis of information practices, whether it is confidence in the government's ability to secure the information it receives, or whether it is any other factor. We understand the trust deficit that exists in the community, and our view is as follows. The best way to tackle a trust deficit is to build trust. And that is not an overnight process. It may very well be an incremental process, but it has to start somewhere. And so what I would ask is that we be given the opportunity to breach whatever trust deficit exists in your minds and in your practices, and let's start somewhere. And so as we develop now the automated capacity to receive and to disseminate cyber threat indicators, and we will do so in a formulaic or standardized way through a sticks and taxis system, we ask that you give us a chance, that you share some information with us and allow us to prove our capabilities and to prove the results. Sir.
Sir, good.
Thank you.
It's
you
on.
can ask the question and I'll repeat it for everyone's ability.
It's on.
Sir, thanks for taking my question and for your time this morning, or this afternoon as the case may be. First, can you give us a little bit of an insider's view into the department's activities in the wake and the occurrence of both Sony and OPM? Of course, pending the proverbial, can't tell you pending investigation, right? Whatever you can share. But that would be very interesting and enlightening, as you've talked about DHS being at the nexus between intel, law enforcement, et cetera. Can you give us a little bit of an insider's view about what happened when the phone rang that first day, the department's activities, what the coordination that happened, and things that we may not have been aware of that you were all doing to facilitate that?
So did everybody hear that question? So that's those incidents require an all-in response because of their magnitude and the consequences that follow. What we have done in a number of incidents, whether it's in those or in others, quite frankly, is of course we gather the information, but our CERT teams, our computer emergency readiness teams, respond to locations and assist victims of attacks in the identification of the actor and the expulsion of the actor, and critically in the remediation that must follow. So we, in the OPM breach, that our CERT team was very engaged in those responsibilities and those actions, and I think it's very public, it's very known that as an administration, as a government writ large, we, through the leadership of the White House, developed a 30-day sprint regime to ensure that other government agencies, in the wake of the OPM breach, other government agencies heightened their network security defenses to the extent possible within a short sprint, and then are engaging in the longer-term effort to ensure their security mechanisms.
Deputy Secretary.
Sir.
Yeah, the Senate wasn't able to get to CISA before they left on break, but many have said that they do plan on taking it up this fall, hopefully before the budget fight. Can you talk a little bit about, as you set these standards for establishing the ISAOs, how CISA and other legislation coming out of Congress will affect the creation of those?
So I'm not That's an interesting question of how the legislation will impact the ISOWs and the creation of those. I think what's important for us with respect to CISA and the legislation is how it impacts the provision of information to the government and the government's ability to disseminate it in as near real time as possible. I think that has been our focus with respect to CISA, primarily number one, identifying the Department of Homeland Security, hopefully in the legislation, as the primary portal to receive information from the private sector for the various reasons that I've identified, because of our unique position in the federal government, as well as our unique responsibilities from a privacy and civil rights, civil liberties perspective. And of course, it significantly impacts the ability of private entities to share information, and hopefully removes an obstacle, and that obstacle is concern about liability exposure. I'll give further thought, if I may, to the question of how it impacts the ISOWs.
Question in the center here.
Yes, sir. Thank you for being here. I have a question about the critical infrastructure sectors, and specifically the defense industrial base. What do you see as far as
So I didn't quite hear that. I apologize.
with the defense industrial base sector, critical infrastructure sector? What's your analysis on the private industry's participation with reporting incidents from the private industry?
All the more critical when it involves critical infrastructure. How's that for the use of the same term twice in one sentence? I mean, that is a pivotal information, and I will tell you, certain sectors of the critical infrastructure landscape are far more advanced than others in working with the federal government to protect their industrial control systems. It's of vital importance, and the Department of Homeland Security is very, very engaged in that effort. As a matter of fact, when I referred to our CERT teams, we have ICS CERT, Industrial Control System CERT, specifically dedicated to those efforts. Thank you. So let me, if I can, make an important point that I think underlies our vision for the receipt, the sharing of information, and specifically the sharing of cyber threat indicators. There are many now on the current landscape that treat cyber threat indicators as having proprietary value. And we understand that in the effort to protect network security. But we in the government have to have a view by necessity, given our responsibilities to protect the public good and the public safety, to have a more macro view, and cannot necessarily have as proprietary a view of something that can be of such value to the ecosystem as a whole. And what we hope is that the proprietary value will be found in other aspects of building and establishing network security, but not in the cyber threat indicator itself. That the cyber threat indicator and the sharing of that will have a public dimension that is unprecedented, because it is absolutely vital to the ability to protect the ecosystem that those cyber threat indicators are disseminated and shared far more publicly than they are now. And we hope that that paradigm becomes the paradigm of the future in the service of our mission, of our Homeland Security mission, which includes the security of the network. We are very invested in research and development, and perhaps some of you heard our representative from our Office of Science and Technology, very engaged in the research and development in achieving network security, and that is an investment that we are making in the private as well as the public sector. And on the point of the cyber threat indicators as public property, if you will. The internet is often referred to as a global commons, and in the government, we think of the common good. And we think that in order to really protect the identity of the institution as a global commons, we would beseech others to think of the common good as well. And we look forward to partnering in that respect, tackling the trust deficit, and really being in a prime position to enable and to facilitate your efforts to secure the network. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any other questions or comments you might have.
Please step up to the microphone. Center.
Hi. I have to tell you, I'm just a little bothered with you saying just trust us with your data. Just a little bit at a time, when breaches can take a long time to be disclosed. And so the data that we were providing you could be viewed, could be seen, and you don't know about it, you don't realize it for years and years and years. The government can't maintain security of even the military, the White House. The Department of Homeland Security has issues with its employees groping others, disclosing data, theft. And it's even released a document publicly that shows congressional IDs, military IDs, and things like that. So when you say, just trust us with your data, it's hard for me to let go of that. And I understand where you're coming from. I'm not trying to be adversarial about it.
No, I don't take it that way at all.
I'm just being, I just haven't got that comfort level. Would you be opposed to having someone more from the hacker community pen testing it and saying, and certifying it and saying, here's a letter, we've gone through this and checking it? Because, with the PSO breach and the other things that have been going on,
So-
you just need to give us more, in my opinion,
So let
than
me,
just trust us.
okay, so let me, and I appreciate the candor very much, and that's why I raised the issue of trust. And I don't think, and I hope I didn't create the impression, sir, or everyone, that I come here and I say, you know what, just trust us, give us everything you got, and we're going to take care of it. I'm from the government, I'm here to help. I don't think that's what I said. I think what I said was, I recognize the trust deficit. I understand that it is born of a number of factors. You might have mentioned one or two with which I would take issue, but that's perhaps a separate sidebar discussion. But the question is this: where can we start to build it, to repair it, to build it back, however you might frame it? And what will it take? And what I asked for is, let's start somewhere. Start small, and let's build from there. If you need a third-party validator, remember, one of the key principles of information sharing is equality of access. And I don't know how that principle interplays with the notion of a hacker that is a third-party validator. And remember, one third-party validator may not be another's third-party validator. So I appreciate the suggestion, and what I would ask is for other suggestions on how we can build the trust. I understand the deficit that exists, and you might be in a position to say, if you suffer an attack, you may be in a position to say, you know what, given the dimensions of this attack or the particular qualities of it, I don't quite feel comfortable sharing the cyber threat indicator with the government, and that is your prerogative, and that is your liberty. But perhaps there is an attack, the indicator of which you would feel comfortable because of its particular qualities, and perhaps you're willing to give that a try, and perhaps our response protocols, and perhaps our response in total will actually build a little confidence in you to perhaps revisit the next one that comes along that you previously were unwilling to share. So my thought is, find a spot where you feel comfortable starting, and let's build from there. And if we earn your trust, great, and if we don't, we're going to have to tackle the reason why not.
The next question is coming from the far side.
Mr. Secretary, the question is about ISACs versus ISOWs. What is there in the ISOW process now that will rectify some of the problems that we were unable to create confidence in the ISACs over all those years?
So the organization that we are going to select this month to develop the best practices will be an organization that is fervently engaged in public discourse with respect to the challenges that have plagued to some extent the ISACs. Certainly we've heard great praise with respect to some ISACs and some criticisms and some challenges. And so the institution that we select to develop best practices for the ISOWs, which are not necessarily sector specific, that public engagement will hopefully prove the solution to tackling the challenges that you have either experienced or know of. And public engagement and openness and transparency in the development of this new system, of this new architecture, I should say, is vital.
We have a question in the center aisle, sir.
You mentioned about automated real-time sharing of information.
Yes,
and
near
also
real time.
Yeah, and that's good. And also you mentioned about protection of privacy and confidentiality and that kind of thing. I think that these are kind of two things that needs to be balanced. I mean, if you want automated and real-time sharing, then but you need to look into the information so that if it's okay to share and so on. So what is your plan to deal or balance those two things?
So let me share with you why the word near in preceding real time is so important. It goes precisely, I think, to the point that you are making. Our goal is to share in near real time the information we receive, because the difference between real time and near real time is creating the space for the privacy and civil liberty equities to be properly addressed. And what we are doing is now, and our goal is to roll it out more fulsomely in October of this year, is to build the automated capability and to develop protocols, and those protocols will be the subject of great discourse.
That's taxi and sticks?
Yes, sticks and taxi.
We have a question on this side.
Hi, thanks. So how do you think that the OPM breach impacts the information sharing debate and your considerations? What would you say to people who say now that the federal government should not be trusted with more either cyber threat indicators or personal data potentially, since the massive breach showed that the federal agencies were not able to protect the personal data that they already had?
Well, I think, quite frankly, that different parts of the government are more advanced in their network security systems than others, and the OPM breach was obviously a significant challenge, but one has to, in the government, with the responsibilities we have, one must address it as an opportunity. It's an identification of a challenge and an opportunity to address it, not only with OPM specifically and the information it warehouses, but across the government. And the 30-day sprint that was led by the White House was not an OPM-specific 30-day sprint, but was across the government departments and agencies. So I've heard as recently as this morning, in speaking with some of the attendees here, about the OPM breach and its impact on the confidence in sharing information with the government. And as I think I addressed, The rattled confidence is born not exclusively because of the OPM breach. For some, that might have impacted the confidence level. For others, it's born of other things. And we've got to rebuild or strengthen the trust relationship, and we're dedicated to doing so. And so we've responded to the OPM breach with vigilance, and we're going to be a stronger network security system in the government than we were previously.
Question on this side, sir.
But to not share, if I may, sorry, but to not share the information, or at least to not start in some way to share the information and give it a try, I think is surrendering the ability to exploit a capability that may in fact, and I think, and my colleagues think, will in fact work in strengthening the network security as a whole. Sorry, James.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's a consensus that sharing is very important. You've talked about trust as being one of the barriers for that, and I was wondering if you had some thoughts on what role anonymity could play in assuring that in your vision for sharing. I think that could actually help bridge that trust gap that you've talked about.
There's a difference between breach and bridge, by the way. I just want to. So that's a very important point, and anonymity is going to be a cornerstone of our information sharing protocols. That's a very important point.
Okay, I didn't realize this gentleman was standing already. You're next, sir.
Yes, so you've been discussing the automated delivery of cyber threat indicators. Is your organization at this time considering the automated collection of those sorts of indicators?
Yes, what we are building is the ability in automated form to receive, and then the automated ability to share, to disseminate.
Yes, what I'm trying to describe instead is one could envision, say, on-site monitoring, that kind of thing. Are you considering branching out into that sort of direction, or no?
I'm sorry, are we considering?
Branching out potentially into on-site monitoring, that sort of thing.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
On this side?
The monitoring of the data, that is, I think, beyond the purview of what we are building now.
Next question in the center here.
Hi. So I'm assuming the U.S. government is going to be participating in releasing information that the individual agencies see, but in light of the emails from Hacking Team and the releases from Edward Snowden, will there be releases regarding 0 days that the U.S. has bought and is using or is receiving through contractors? Will that information be shared through this channel as well?
I don't know the answer to that question. You know, in the interest of as much openness and transparency, I'm going to ask my colleague, Phyllis. Do you know the answer to that question? We're going to declassify and release everything we can.
Thank you.
The question on this side, sir.
So from a...
Thank you, Phyllis.
You've talked a bit about the anonymization of sources, and that's
Yes.
really great. How do you intend to vet recipients of indicators such that your adversaries aren't monitoring those channels to know when those indicators are basically burned?
So somebody asked the question before, and we are building the capabilities to ensure the provenance, if you will, of the information we receive. And I think we'll be able to speak to that more technically at a future date. But we are very well aware of that concern.
Question from the center, sir.
So there's a couple of things. One, when you look at the government as a whole, it is the computer and network security is held together by baling wire, chewing gum, and duct tape. You've got Windows 98 operating in military bases. You've got some of Vista. You've got and everybody's trying to do that, and your contracting process is driving a lot of that. And you are a government, so how are you going to address this? Because by the time you catch up with the technology, it's already past you. So are you having a culture change with regards to how you're building this new information security automation? Are you changing also how you're recruiting? Because by the time somebody gets through a clearance, again, they're not interested anymore. I mean, and most people who really do good work in this couldn't get clearance for those reasons.
So given how you've described our system, I don't think I'm going to invite you to my office to play a game of Pong anytime soon. No, so
I like Atari.
Yeah, exactly. Your question is spot on, and let me share with you from personal experience. I used to be at an agency. I used to lead an agency that that administered the legal immigration system of our nation, and it was a paper-based system. And that means that we receive paper, we move paper from office to office around the country, and we send out paper. And one could walk into a warehouse and see thousands and thousands and thousands of files of paper separated by index cards identifying the alphabetical order of the files. And we were embarked upon and remain embarked upon an effort to automate and to bring online that system. And we had a multi-year contract that was developing an architecture that I became and my colleagues became concerned would be outdated by the time we rolled it out. And so we moved to more off-the-shelf products. We moved to an agile development cycle. We brought in expertise from the private sector, and we changed our acquisition model entirely. And that is not something specific to that agency. That is something that we across the department are very focused on. You identify the recruitment of talent. We're very focused on that. We're very pleased that we had legislative support for our ability to recruit the top talent in changing the pay scale. We've brought in the administration. This administration has really invented a model that is extraordinary, the digital services that draws from the private sector on a full-time but short-term basis of the top talent. We are working through our human capital processes to make sure clearances are far more facile and more nimble than they have been, because we lose people in the clearance process because they have other opportunities when they're as talented as this pool of individuals is. So on the recruiting, on the clearance, on the acquisition side, those are all areas of intense focus and activity in the department.
On the far side here?
Yeah. You had mentioned, the lady there before had mentioned about having antiquated systems and so forth. How are you going to maintain, as you go forward, accountability for ensuring you execute on replacing or upgrading systems or patching systems? Are you going to have an audit or results of audits that, you want us to trust you, but can you show us, hey, that you're improving? Are you going to have a scorecard that we can see, the public can see, in order to, have some of that trust that you are improving, that you are able to secure the information we provide you?
So we have quite a number of accountability mechanisms, both within the department and outside the department, whether it's our own inspector general, whether it's a GAO, and of course, quite frankly, we have oversight committees in the legislature. But I think your idea of self-initiated oversight and publication of the results is very good, and our people very well may be already focused on that, but I will certainly note that and communicate its importance. I think that's a very important thing to underscore.
Yeah, and then the gentleman also had mentioned about having hackers do your testing of your systems, maybe having independent private sectors perform some of that testing for you so that you have that third-party objectivity.
So we have, in our own organization, we have a red team methodology, if you will. So we pressure test internally. But the publication of information and the transparency and openness are critical parts, and it goes to the issue of trust, I think, that is on everyone's mind as well. It's a very good point.
We have about 9 minutes left. If you have questions, you need to be standing. Question here.
Thank you. Hello. With the government's latest economic crisis, we've kind of moved to a model of lowest cost technically acceptable, and that's really stemmed a lot of vulnerabilities. With information sharing, that's not going to be able to capture all vulnerabilities that are on the horizon. So what is your vision moving forward in having something a little more than technically acceptable to allow us to be able to combat some of these threats that are on the horizon?
I don't think our approach is a penny wise, pound foolish approach. I think we're looking at building the best capability, and while cost is always a factor, given the fact that we are stewards of public funds, it's always a material factor, but it is not determinative. I don't think we take a penny wise, pound foolish approach to especially given the criticality of the endeavor. I don't know if I tackled your issue head on.
No, I mean, it's said that the breaches are really stemming from a lot of contract work that may not be up to par due to, again, just the acquisition process being that you can employ or put staff technically acceptable, which isn't really doing much for us now. I mean, we just need to be on top of things and way ahead of the curve to be able to defeat and combat what we see on the horizon. And I mean, I was just wondering, going forward, is that going to continue to be the case? And are we going to change our model to, and I know a lot of this is within Congress and funding and everything else, but what are we doing to be able to employ more technical folks that can be in positions that we can entrust and make sure that our systems are as secure as they need to be?
When you say we, are you speaking of us in the government?
Yes.
So we have a very concerted effort to recruit the best and the brightest. I should say one of the things that we are doing, and we're trying to move as quickly as possible, is open an office in Silicon Valley to really, for a number of reasons, break down barriers, given the amount of activity and the amount of cutting edge work there, to be able to capitalize and capture that cutting edge work, and critically to, I think, the point that you make, to assist in our recruiting of the talent that is there, so that we are active on both coasts.
Thank you.
You know, there's also something fundamental in joining the government and the efforts that we undertake that is independent of an economic calculus. And I think many of you appreciate it given the work that you do. And that is the fulfillment quotient of actually working on something that is extraordinarily important to the well-being of many. It harkens back to my opening statement about the security of our institutions, the security of our way of life, the security of our values, and being able to bring one's views and one's talents and one's capabilities to bear in the service of that effort. So many of you do that in your own way through the work that you do, and we feel equally proud in the work that we do in the government towards that shared end.
I would like to shamefully take advantage of my position on stage to ask you a question, sir.
Please.
As probably one of the only holders of an I-94 in this room, I would ask you, how can the department take advantage of individuals like myself who have strong ties to the United States, I married an American, yet are not yet citizens and therefore considered untrustworthy alien types? How can I help you more, and how can we take more advantage of those who have strong allegiance to America, yet not yet citizenship?
So I will not, just because I'm not addressing it doesn't mean I accept the description that you gave of individuals who come to this country as immigrants. I will tell you, James, that I myself am an immigrant. I was born in Cuba and came here as a political refugee. I think one of the cornerstones of the President's effort to pass comprehensive immigration reform is to ensure that the talent that resides here in the United States, but was not born here, but that has been educated here, is actually able to stay here and to bring and devote their talents to the strengthening and betterment of our nation. It is a gaping hole in our immigration system, and one that he and all of us in the administration are very dedicated to closing.
Are there any more questions? We have one from this side.
Yeah, just...
This will be the last question.
Talking about the point you're making about trust, I think one of the things that's been kind of stated in a couple of different ways here is that really independent third-party assessment is an important way for the government to establish trust. And I realize you have the red teams and all this kind of thing, but I think an external validation party is an important part of the process. The other thing I would ask about in terms of trust is I heard the director at RSA ask for access to encryption keys. And in terms of trust and privacy, I think asking for exceptional access without a workable solution doesn't help establish trust.
And that point has been made, I think, throughout my visit here, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the challenges that presents, and it is clear, at least from the questions or comments I've received from a number, that third-party validation will be certainly helpful in advancing the trust that underlies a partnership, and I will take that back and foot stomp that point. And I appreciate very much the opportunity to be here and to share my thoughts on behalf of the department, and I look forward to, quite frankly, with confidence, I look forward to strengthening and perhaps re-earning the trust of many of you. Thanks so very much for the opportunity.
On behalf of the Black